Hello everyone, let's talk a little bit about CG, or center of gravity. Center of gravity is defined as the one point where all of the mass of an object mathematically actually acts. We have been working with this in our physics class a lot, and you may or may not have realized it. When we were talking about forces and summing the forces on an object, I would have you put a little dot in the center, the geometric center of that object, and we would put all of our forces and label them from that center of mass, or that center of gravity. When we talked about the acceleration of gravity and we talked about the force of gravity between the Earth and the Moon, when we calculated the force of gravity between the Earth and the Moon, it's from the center of gravity of the Earth to the center of gravity of the Moon. When we were messing around with vectors and we had maybe a boat that was crossing the water, and the boat would have a velocity in one direction and maybe there was a current in another direction, I would have you put all those force vectors at one spot. That spot represented the CG, the center of gravity of that object. And then, of course, we would add our vectors nose to tail. What is the center of gravity of an object? Well, if an object is geometrically symmetrical, it's going to be the geometric center. So if you have a ball or a sphere, it's going to be the exact center. If you have a flat disk, it's going to be the exact center. If you have a long rod, it's going to be the geometric center. Everything from cylinders to triangles to any shape, if it is a nice symmetrical shape, not kind of weird and crazy, the geometric center is going to be the CG. The center of gravity is also the balance point. And I really would like to have you try this. If you want to hit pause and do this, take a pen, take one finger under one side of the pen, take another finger under the other side of the pen, or a ruler if you've got a ruler, and move it closer and closer and closer to closer. And when you actually get to the point that it all balances, you have found the CG of that object. So it's really kind of nifty. If there's more weight on one end than the other, well, the CG will not be in the geometric center. There are some cool toys and gizmos that you can buy out in the world that look a little crazy because of the fact that they've got weight in odd places, but there's so much weight that is forward. They don't look like they should balance, but they do, and I kind of really like those a lot. They're really fun. The center of gravity of an odd-shaped object can be found by using the point at which it tips. My husband and I are both ham radio operators, and many, many years ago he got an idea. He wanted to build a tip tower, a tower that stands up, and then when you want to work on antennas, you tip it over. And he wanted to know, where should he put the pivot? And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, wife of mine, you are clever. Calculate the CG of this thing." And I went, "Oh, that looks really hard." So what we did instead is this. We put in the middle of our driveway, we put a whole bunch of concrete blocks, and we put this tower on top of it. And then we kept scooching and scooching and scooching the tower off the concrete blocks. When it got to the point that it began to tip slightly, took a permanent marker, went beep, 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 marked it, and that was the center of gravity. So if you find the tipping point of any object as it's going off a support, that is its CG. And I challenge you to stop right now and do that with something wacky. Your stapler, don't do it with anything like your calculator that you might drop and hurt, but it's kind of fun to try. If the center of gravity of an object is over the base of support, it's going to be stable. We've talked in the past about the fact that if you've got a book sitting on a table, the center of gravity is over the support, it's just going to sit there all day. But if you scooch that book off the edge of the table and you move that CG off past the edge of the table, the force of gravity is going to produce a force vector down. Here is going to be your lever arm, and we both know force times lever arm is going to give you a torque, and torques produce rotation. If you are a person and your CG is going to be close to your middle, if you have that CG over your feet, you're going to be stable. You slip on a banana peel or do something crazy, if that CG is past your point of support, This is your lever arm. This is your force. And ta-da, a torque has been produced and you're going to fall over. Lots of examples of center of gravity. In my entire professional life, I've always had a filing cabinet in my office. And I tend to be an incredibly lazy human being. I don't put a lot in the bottom drawer. The top drawer is full, the second drawer is really full, and it gets less populated as I go down the filing cabinet. Well, many times I have pulled out the second drawer and looked for something and gone, grumble, 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 it's not in there. And then I pull out the top drawer. And as I pull this top drawer out, guess what happens? Yeah, some of you, it's happened to you. I get the whole thing going, and it starts to rotate and fall on top of me. Well, here's what's going on. When all the drawers are closed, the force of gravity is over the base of support and it's very stable. When I take the heaviest drawers and pull them out, and the CG is now past that point of support, here's my lever arm, here's my force, I have a torque, and I get rotation. One of my dear girlfriends decided to abandon everything and become a truck driver. And she taught me an awful lot by explaining to me about load and having to move loads. If you have semi-trucks that are on a hill, inside of the back of the semi, whatever they're hauling has to be loaded. Well, if you go on an off-ramp or something that is got a tilt or a degree angle to it, the load has to be over the base of support, and the base of support for a truck is going to be the wheels. If this gets too high, oh boy, this one's kind of close, but if the load shifts or if it's not loaded properly and the load is past the point of support when a semi's on a hill, you're going to get a semi tipped over, and that's a mess for everybody involved. Center of gravity for men and women is a little bit different. Ladies, we are blessed with childbirthing hips, and because of that, our CG tends to be more in our hip area. Gentlemen, typically guys have shoulders as a larger feature on their body than most women, and that tends to have a CG that is higher. And little kids are kind of middle-ish. It depends on how leggy they are and how old they are. But I've taught center of gravity for many, many years, and I have had women students who are swimmers that, oh boy howdy, when we calculate their CG, it's really, really high. And I have had men with very, very strong legs, and their center of gravity is quite low. So a lot of this depends upon your personal body shape. When we start talking about CG, it's also the center of buoyancy. If you float in the water, if your CG is sort of in your middle, that's kind of where you are going to be buoyant. My son has scuba dived quite a bit, and when you scuba dive, they put on weights. And at first I was like, why in the world they're putting lots of extra lead weights on my kid to send him in the pool? Well, if somebody is not swimming horizontally and they're swimming through the scuba like this, well, you're going to have an awful lot of drag through the water. You also do not want to be going through the water like this with your butt up in the air. You're going to have a lot of drag in the water. So they have to try and make you neutrally buoyant, and that means they move some weights up and down and here and there to get you to have a good horizontal attitude. Same sort of thing happens when you are out in your boat. The engine has to be in the right location to give you the correct quantity of thrust. And so that means you've got to have the CG in the right spot on your boat. Otherwise, your boat's going to be way up out of the water, and you're not going to have a nice smooth ride. The center of gravity is also the center of rotation. Olympic diving, gymnasts, things like that are fabulous examples of rotation and CG. When this diver spins, she's going to spin around her midsection because that's the center of her CG. This diver is spinning in the horizontal axis, and her CG is going to be the horizontal line through her body. I love this picture because when we were talking about projectiles, when humans project themselves through space, it's hard to see this projectile motion, this pretty little parabolic path, because there's arms and legs kind of flying everywhere. But if you take the CG of this athlete and you plot it, that center of gravity makes the prettiest little parabola you ever saw. Those of you who have been through forklift training, you can't put too much weight too far forward on your forklift. You've got to keep the CG over the wheels to keep your forklift stable. My husband and I have built lots and lots of airplanes. And one of the things that's interesting with planes when you do a weight and balance is the center of gravity has to be over the point of support. But the point of support is not the wheels, it's the wings. And so you have to have your CG here. If your center of gravity in an aircraft is too far forward, you're going to fly through the air like this, and you're not going to get a good quantity of lift, and that's not going to be safe. If you have too much weight aft or in the back end of the aircraft, you're going to fly through the air like this, and that's not going to be safe because of the fact that your aircraft is going to be in danger of stalling. So a weight and balance on an aircraft, very, very important. Keeping that CG under the point of support. Another one of my favorite examples of center of gravity are expectant moms. Women who are just standing there, their center of gravity is going to be over their feet, and life's good. Well, you get in the latter stages of pregnancy and you have 10, 20 or more pounds of child, and it moves forward. The poor mom is kind of in danger of tipping over because the center of gravity is starting to move past the edge of her feet. So what do expectant moms do? They tip, and they kind of tip their backs back in an attempt to not fall over, keep their CG over their feet. And that is one of the reasons that the people you love that have had a child, or if you've had a child, it's one of the reasons your back gets so sore. You're constantly adjusting your center of gravity. All right, this picture was sent to me on the internet a few years back, and it's fabulous, and I love it. And I want you to hit pause, take a moment. What's wrong with this picture? Okay, what's wrong with this picture? This fellow's CG should be right here. Okay? Yeah. He should be falling on his keister. This is impossible. It shouldn't work because this is his base of support. So this picture was tweaked slightly because this is really what's going on. He's standing on a side hill. Because of the fact that he's standing on a side hill, his center of gravity is going to go right through the midsection of his body, and it's going to go like this, and he is over his base of support, and that's why he doesn't fall over, and that's why he can stand up. All right, I love CG. I hope you see it all over the place, and we will talk later. Bye-bye.